This is a TalkStation original podcast.
This afternoon, it's a real pleasure to have joining us Dr. Michelle Malkin. And by the way, before you confuse this is Dr. Malkin at East Carolina University, not the political pundit Michelle Malkin, but Dr. Michelle Malkin at East Carolina University, where she is involved in a project that is pretty important starting today, and that, of course, having to do with gambling. She's an assistant professor of criminal justice and criminology at ECU, and she's leading a project that I want to learn more about, having to do with gambling. And with that, Dr. Malkin, as we are pre-recording this, you just shared with me a moment ago, you've been very busy doing interviews today?
Very busy, as sports wagering went live today at noon. So a lot of people are very interested to know what is happening here in North Carolina and what we think is going to happen now that sports wagering is legal.
You've been called from by news organizations across the state, I gather, or are organizations outside the state calling you as well?
Well, we've had interviews from state all the way to national. We've been being interviewed as high as ESPN, interested in what we have to say about what's happening here in North Carolina.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. May I inquire, what was your comment to ESPN, which, by the way, has now joined forces with some of the gambling organizations as well? What was your comment to them? I'm just curious.
Well, we were talking about how North Carolina is not the first nor the last to go live with sports wagering, and we were looking at how this may impact different communities here in North Carolina, especially among our college students.
Let's talk first and foremost about your efforts and a program that is initiated out of ECU. It's the Gambling Research and Policy Initiative. What exactly is that initiative?
Well, the Gambling Research and Policy Initiative, commonly called GRPI, is going to be doing research that impacts North Carolina, tries to understand how different forms of gambling, whether legal or not, are impacting different communities here in the state, but also to understand how gambling impacts individuals in general. So we're able to do research throughout the country as well as the world.
North Carolina, I think, is the 30th state now to legalize online sports gambling. Are other institutions doing a similar project? Is this unique, or do you have a template by which to go?
Well, there are other gambling research institutes and centers at a handful of colleges and universities around the country. It isn't that common. There are not enough people who are interested in studying how gambling impacts communities or individuals. And so we need more researchers. We also need more funding for research. So unfortunately, while there's lots of funding for, say, drugs and alcohol to understand how that impacts different communities, there's very little funding out there for research. But luckily, here in North Carolina, when the legislature put money towards DHHS to do outreach and education and treatment, it was DHHS who actually said, we value research, and so they came to us to establish the GRPI with hopes that we'll be able to get additional funding from other sources over time.
You're working through the university system at East Carolina University. Are you collaborating or utilizing the services of other UNC system schools?
Well, we are brand new, but part of our goals are to be funding research throughout the entire UNC system for researchers who are interested in anything that could help us understand how gambling impacts individuals and communities more. We're going to have funding for some small grants as well as funding for graduate students who will work on relevant theses and dissertations.
Will any of this also involve psychoanalysis or psychiatry? Is that really the primary concern, or our focus is the addictive nature of gambling, or the addictive nature of anything, but in this case, gambling?
So many people can gamble at a healthy rate.
Right.
They never cross over into any gambling-related harms, and you don't know when you place your first wager whether you're going to be somebody who can go down that path. And unfortunately for a number of people, they experience gambling-related harms, and here in North Carolina, we already have a 5.5% problem gambling rate among adults. So that means that whether we have as many forms of legalized gambling as other jurisdictions or not, we already have people engaged in gambling and suffering from gambling-related harms. And so there is a lot of need to be serving individuals here in the state with gambling problems.
the question comes up to, and I make mention of a story I read recently in East Magazine from ECU, that your expertise lies in gambling among marginalized communities and problem gambling, and then, of course, the issues of crime. Is there a particular demographic that you'll be focusing on? Obviously, many of them, but are there certain ones that you already have focused? And I want to bring up the topic of college students here in a moment as well.
Yeah, well, we've been doing research among college students across the UNC system. We've actually run a study among 12 of the different campuses to see kind of baseline how gambling is impacting college campuses and individuals who are college students, and we're expanding that into our community colleges as well. In addition to that, we are specifically interested in looking intersectionally at this. We look at how it impacts different racial and ethnic groups differently, LGBTQ individuals, understanding gambling based on gender, things like that. So most research from history is really based on the experiences of men, because traditionally men were more likely to gamble, men were more likely to have gambling issues. And in today's world, that's just not true. While men do gamble at higher rates and there are more men seeking help for gambling in general, we see a huge growing demographic of women and people from all ethnic and minority groups engaged in gambling with different needs, because they may have experienced minority stress and other kinds of traumas in their life, which may lead to addictions faster.
You bring up a very interesting aspect of that, and that is the impetus for getting involved in gambling. And of course, I acknowledge that gambling is something that it comes about casually in every instance. I bet you I can accomplish this task, whatever, and it's just a form of challenge, if you will. But the other aspect of it, and I think this is an important one, is the impetus of external issues. And I want to focus for a moment on college students who are in some instances being fearful, and should be, about their ability to pay off their college debt, or for that matter, move ahead once they move out of college. Is that also a concern? Would that be one of the impetuses you're looking at?
Well, we are always concerned when people might see gambling as a way out of financial debt. Gambling should be a form of entertainment, which is budgeted into a normal budget that's healthy. Right. Gambling cannot be the way somebody pays down any kind of debt, because you are more likely to lose than win. And so your debt would just get deeper and deeper and deeper. So we are mostly concerned with college students because we are not educating young people on how to understand the risks involved. And college students are just more likely to be less risk averse. So if they hear about the opportunity to potentially win big money, they're more likely to engage in behavior and spend money that they don't necessarily have to spend on gambling in the hopes of winning a lot more money. Also, if they see somebody they know that has won, or if perhaps early in their own gambling experience they won, they are much more likely to cross over into problematic gambling faster. And so we are particularly concerned about individuals, not just college students, but all emerging adults, individuals under the age of 25 who are exhibiting higher risk and quicker risk to gambling disorder.
Again, we're talking with Dr. Michelle Malkin. Dr. Malkin, the question then goes to the topic of crime and criminology, and I find it interesting that you're leading the program, and I mean that in the sense that, is there a particular focus here on that criminal aspect? I mean, will you be utilizing psychologists and psychiatrists in your research program as well? And I would assume that is even an activity even within criminology.
Yes. So addiction has always been something that criminal justice and criminology has always been interested in, because we've always kind of had a criminalization of addiction and addictive behaviors in general. But the study of gambling is very interdisciplinary, and I work all the time with people who are psychologists, social workers, psychiatrists, neuroscientists. You name the field, there can be a connection to gambling. I think I'm the only criminologist in the U.S. who's really focused on gambling-motivated crime, which is the kind of crime that is committed by people who do cross over into gambling disorder, have a number of gambling-related harms, run out of legal avenues for money, and need money to continue gambling or to pay off debts related to gambling. And debts related to gambling aren't just the kind of debts to like a bookie or a casino, but they're the debts that they can't pay because they lost money gambling, such as paying their rent or trying to keep food on the table, things like that. And so those kinds of crimes are actually quite common. In fact, over 50% of people seeking help for gambling will admit to committing at least one gambling-motivated crime. Now, most of them do not face criminal justice consequences because these crimes, unfortunately, are against loved ones, spouses, parents, and sometimes they're also against employers. These are crimes of trust where people have trusted you with money. And so a lot of times individuals either don't get caught or the criminal justice system doesn't get involved. But at least 14% of people who seek help will have been arrested for a gambling-motivated crime. And we also know the highest prevalence of gambling problems in society is among those in forensic populations. So those in jails and prisons have as much as 20 to 30% rate of gambling disorder. And they're actually developing it sometimes while they're in these carceral settings because gambling is so prevalent in jails and prisons.
I want to go to the topic of now digital or internet gambling and the fact that now it's a lot easier. You mentioned a moment ago bookies and things of this nature, which was kind of, if you will, I'm thinking somewhat of a boundary that a lot of people weren't comfortable with. But now that we've introduced this in the form of phone gambling, you just the easy access of pushing a button, does that enhance the concerns related to both the addictive nature of gambling and also maybe, as you've just shared with us, the potential criminal impacts of it as well?
So what we know is that when gambling is not legal and regulated, people are still engaged in it in illegal and unregulated ways. So there can be kind of illegal gambling through organized crime and offshore wagering going on. Right. Legalized and regulated gambling is always better, but it does increase prevalence. And so more people will be engaged in gambling, which could result in a higher problem gambling rate, which could result in more gambling-related harms, which ultimately can lead to things like crime, but also suicide. We know 1 in 5 people who have gambling disorder at the most severe rates will attempt suicide. So our goal is to try to identify individuals who may be starting to experience gambling-related harms and intervene and get them the help they need before it gets to the point of them committing a crime and or becoming suicidal.
So the purpose of this research is not just a matter of documentation, I gather. It's also establishing means for assistance and things of that nature.
Yes, we're actually doing a study among people who've sought help for gambling to find out what forms of help have been most successful for them and why, so that we can help identify those resources that we need more of, both here in North Carolina as well as in other communities around the country.
And then final question for you, Dr. Malkin. The availability of your organization, is this something that you would be reaching out to or would like the public to know more about? Is there a means of communications and a system set up? And I don't know, how long has this organization existed? Let me start with that. Quick question.
Well, we were officially established in fall, but really this year's our ramp up. We just hired our first employee. We're hiring 2 more full-time employees who will both be researchers. And so by summer, we expect to be kind of fully engaged in everything. But up to now, it's been about setting up our office and getting things ready while we're also conducting research that we were already conducting before the GRPI was established.
Okay, and again, GRPI standing for Gambling Research and Policy Initiative. Is there any desire on your part to want to attract participation, or is there anything you're looking for? And this may be premature, but I'm just looking forward to the future.
Yeah, I mean, we will be doing research throughout North Carolina quite a bit. There will be opportunities for people to engage in the research, to help us. We hire peer researchers all the time within the communities to help us understand and reach communities. But right now, we're still at the infancy of all that, but we will be doing prevalence studies throughout North Carolina regularly, so people should anticipate that they may be asked to engage in a study around their own behavior and the behavior of those around them.
Hi, I'm Mike Holmes, professional contractor and TV host. I love helping people, but when it came to improving the water in my own home, I needed help and turned to the water experts at Connecticut to make it right. My water was causing visible problems throughout my home, and it got me thinking about the problems I couldn't see. Protecting my water-using appliances and pipes, preventing stains and hardness buildup, and having clean, great-tasting drinking water are all important to me. But choosing the right water treatment equipment can be tricky. That's where Connecticut comes in. A Connecticut water expert will test your water for free and recommend the system that fits your needs and budget. Improve the quality of your water and your life with the Connecticut water treatment system. I'm so glad I did.
Call Advanced Water Systems today, your local authorized Connecticut dealer. Call 223-4444. That's 223-4444 or 1-800-865-1208. Experts agree Connecticut treats water best.